Jake Thompson was only 16 years old, but he stood in front of the Galactic Council like he had every right to be there. His jacket was old and covered in dust from traveling through 3 different star systems. His boots were scuffed, and his hands showed calluses from years of farm work. He looked small compared to the massive aliens sitting in their floating seats around him, but his eyes were determined. The council chamber was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high that Jake could barely see it. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps and legal documents in languages he couldn't read. Hundreds of alien species filled the viewing galleries, their chittering and clicking creating a constant background noise. But Jake kept his focus straight ahead, on the one being who mattered right now. Emperor Vorian of the Taurek Empire sat on the central throne. He was massive, nearly 12 feet tall when standing, with deep purple skin that seemed to shimmer under the chamber lights. His 4 arms were folded across his chest, and his 3 eyes watched Jake with obvious amusement. Behind the Emperor stood his advisors and warriors, all armed and looking like they could crush Jake with one hand. "Let me understand this correctly," Vorian said, his voice booming through the chamber. "A human child believes he can challenge my rightful claim to the planet New Haven." Jake's jaw tightened. "It's not rightful. My family was there first. We've been farming that land for 5 years. We built our home there. We have legal settlement documents." One of the council members, a floating jellyfish-like creature, spoke up. "The documents are valid, yes. However, Emperor Vorian has invoked the ancient territory clause. His species visited that planet nearly 2,000 years ago. By galactic law, historical presence takes priority." Jake felt his heart sink, but he didn't let it show on his face. Behind him, in the visitor section, his older sister Katie was watching. She tried to stop him from coming here, told him it was useless. Their parents were back on New Haven, packing up everything they owned because they thought the fight was already lost. But Jake couldn't just give up. That farm wasn't just land to them. It was home. "There has to be another way," Jake said. His voice cracked slightly, and he hated that it did. "Some kind of appeal process or—" "Oh, there is one way," Emperor Vorian interrupted, and now he was smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Tell me, young human, do you know anything about Taurek traditions?" Jake shook his head slowly. "We have a custom called the Trial of Worth. When 2 parties cannot agree on ownership, one may challenge the other to complete an impossible task. If they succeed, they win their claim. If they fail—" Vorian leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over Jake. "They forfeit everything and never speak of it again." The chamber erupted in conversation. Aliens were turning to each other, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds. Jake heard Katie gasp behind him. The Trial of Worth was apparently well known to everyone except him. "Jake, no," Katie called out, standing up from her seat. 2 security guards moved to stop her from approaching. "Don't do this. We'll find another planet. We'll start over somewhere else." But Jake was already thinking it through. If he walked away now, they'd lose New Haven for sure. They'd be refugees again, searching for somewhere to settle, spending years in transit stations. His little brother Tommy would grow up without a real home. His parents would lose everything they'd worked for. At least this way, there was a chance. Even a small one. "What's the task?" Jake asked, his voice steady now. Emperor Vorian's smile grew wider. He gestured with one of his 4 hands, and a holographic screen appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a massive creature pacing behind glowing energy bars. The thing was the size of a truck, covered in black scales that looked like they could deflect bullets. It had 6 glowing red eyes and teeth like crystals. Its 6 legs ended in claws that gouged marks into the metal floor as it walked. "This is a Shadow Fang," Vorian announced. "The most dangerous predator from the dark side of my homeworld. We captured this one 3 years ago. Since then, 42 of our finest warriors have tried to tame it. All 42 died within minutes." He looked directly at Jake. "If you can tame this creature by sunset today, New Haven is yours. Your family keeps everything. But when you fail, and you will fail, you surrender all claims. You and your family will leave the planet within 1 solar cycle, and you will never petition the council again." The chamber went completely silent. Even the constant chittering and clicking stopped. Everyone was staring at Jake, waiting to see if he'd be smart enough to walk away. Jake looked at the hologram of the Shadow Fang. It did look terrifying. He wasn't a warrior. He was just a farm kid who knew how to fix tractors and plant crops. But he also knew animals. He'd grown up around them his whole life. "I accept," Jake said clearly. Katie screamed no, from the gallery. Several council members made sounds of disbelief. But Emperor Vorian just laughed, a deep booming sound that echoed off the chamber walls. Excellent. This will be entertaining. You have until sunset. That gives you. Vorian checked the display, approximately 7 hours. Take the boy to the arena. Jake adjusted his backpack on his shoulders and took a deep breath. I'll need access to the holding area. And I need one thing. Oh? What's that? Vorian asked, still chuckling. I need everyone to stay quiet while I work. The arena was nothing like Jake expected. He'd imagined some kind of gladiator pit with sand and blood stains, but instead it was a massive research facility. The walls were white metal, and everything was clinical and cold. Observation windows lined the upper levels, already filling with curious aliens who wanted to watch the human boy get torn apart. Jake tried not to think about that. The containment field crackled with blue energy, separating him from the Shadow Fang. The creature was even more terrifying in person than it had looked on the hologram. Its scales weren't just black, they seemed to absorb light, making it look like a living shadow. Those 6 red eyes tracked his every movement, and when it moved, Jake could feel the vibrations through the floor. The thing had to weigh at least 2 tons. Jake found a spot about 10 feet from the energy barrier and sat down cross-legged on the cold floor. His legs were shaking a little, but he forced himself to breathe slowly and keep his hands steady. Behind him, he could hear the spectators arriving. Their voices carried down from the observation decks, speaking in dozens of different languages. He caught snippets of conversation through the translation devices. 10 minutes, tops, someone said. I give him 5. Look how small he is. The Shadow Fang hasn't eaten in 2 days. It'll be quick at least. Why are they even allowing this? It's just cruel. Jake spotted his sister Katie in the front row of the main observation deck. Her face was pale and her hands were pressed flat against the glass window. She looked like she was trying not to cry. He gave her a small wave, trying to show her he had a plan, even though he wasn't entirely sure he did. The Shadow Fang noticed him sitting there and moved closer to the barrier. Its growl was so deep and loud that Jake felt it in his chest. The creature's lips pulled back, revealing rows and rows of crystalline teeth that looked sharp enough to slice through steel. Drool dripped from its mouth, sizzling when it hit the floor. Some kind of acid, probably. Jake slowly, carefully, took off his backpack. Every movement was deliberate. He didn't want to startle the creature or make it think he was reaching for a weapon. He unzipped the main pocket and started taking things out one at a time, setting them on the floor in front of him. First came the jerky. It was the good kind his mom made, from the deer-like animals they raised on the farm. The smell was strong, smoky and salty. Jake noticed the Shadow Fang's nostrils flare. At least it was interested in food. Next was his water container, just a simple metal bottle with a dent on one side. Then came the blanket. It wasn't fancy, just old fabric that his mom had sewn together from worn-out clothes. It was soft though, and it still smelled like home, like the soap his mom used and the wood smoke from their fireplace. The last item was his grandfather's mouth harp. It was a tiny thing, barely bigger than his palm, made from tarnished metal. His grandpa had taught him to play when he was 7, before the old man passed away. Jake had carried it with him ever since. Up in the observation deck, Emperor Vorian was leaning forward in his massive chair. What is the boy doing? He asked his advisor, a thin reptilian creature with too many eyes. It appears he's unpacking, Your Majesty, the advisor replied, sounding confused. I can see that. But why? Where are his weapons? His armor? His strategy? The advisor had no answer. Jake lifted the mouth harp to his lips and began to play. The sound was soft and gentle, just a simple melody his grandpa used to play on quiet evenings. Nothing complicated, nothing loud. Just a slow, peaceful tune that reminded Jake of home, of safety, of better times. The Shadow Fang's growling stopped. Its head tilted slightly to one side. This is foolish, Emperor Vorian said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The creature is pure rage. It knows only violence. Music won't change its nature. But Jake kept playing. He wasn't trying to change the creature's nature. He was trying to understand it. Around him, the spectators were getting restless. They'd come here expecting action, blood, drama. Instead they were watching a teenage boy sit on the floor playing quiet music to a monster. Bets were being adjusted. Arguments broke out about whether this counted as actually attempting the trial. Jake ignored all of it. He was watching the Shadow Fang carefully, studying every detail. The way it moved wasn't quite right. Its left side seemed stiff, like it was in pain. There were scars all over its body, not battle scars from fighting other predators, but marks that looked like they came from chains and restraints. Its breathing was too fast, too shallow. And its eyes, those 6 glowing red eyes, weren't filled with rage like Vorian claimed. They were filled with fear. Jake had seen that look before, in animals back on the farm. The wild dogs that wandered in from the hills, starving and desperate. The injured birds that attacked because they thought you were going to hurt them. Even their old horse Thunder, who'd been abused by his previous owner and took months to trust anyone. This wasn't a monster. This was a scared, hurt animal that had learned to fight because fighting was the only way it knew to survive. Jake kept playing his gentle music, and he started to notice something else. Every time the crowd got loud, the Shadow Fang flinched. When someone shouted or laughed, its whole body tensed up. The creature wasn't aggressive by nature. It was traumatized. 2 hours passed. The spectators were starting to leave, bored by the lack of violence. But Jake didn't care. He just kept playing, kept breathing slowly, kept showing the Shadow Fang that he wasn't a threat. He was just a boy with a mouth harp, sitting peacefully on the floor. And slowly, very slowly, the creature started to relax. After 3 hours of sitting and playing his mouth harp, Jake stood up slowly. His legs were stiff from sitting so long, and pins and needles ran up his calves. The Shadow Fang's eyes immediately locked onto him, tracking his movement. Jake could feel the weight of those 6 red eyes watching his every breath. "I need to go inside," Jake said quietly to the control room operator. The entire observation deck erupted in noise. Aliens were shouting in their various languages, and the translation devices created a chaotic mix of protests and warnings. Katie was on her feet, both hands pressed against the glass, shaking her head frantically. Commander Lisa Reynolds, the security chief, came down from the observation deck personally. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back tight and a scar running across her left cheek. She'd served in 3 different galactic conflicts and didn't scare easily, but even she looked concerned. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "That creature has killed 42 trained warriors. They were armed, armored, and prepared. You're a kid with a blanket and a harmonica." Jake met her eyes. "Those warriors went in trying to fight it. I'm not going to fight. That won't matter when it tears you apart. You've been trying Force for 3 years. Has it worked?" Jake kept his voice respectful but steady. "Give me 2 hours with a different approach. If it doesn't work, well, I knew the risks when I accepted the challenge." Commander Reynolds looked at him for a long moment. Then she glanced up at Emperor Vorian in his observation box. The Emperor was leaning forward now, actually interested for the first time since the trial began. Vorian's voice boomed through the speakers. "Let him enter. I want to see this." Reynolds clearly didn't like it, but she couldn't override the Emperor. "Fine. But I'm keeping emergency protocols ready. First sign of attack, we're pulling you out." She paused. "And kid? Don't make any sudden movements. Don't run. Predators chase running prey." "I know," Jake said. "I grew up on a farm." The containment field dropped with a crackling sound that made Jake's hair stand on end. The blue energy dissipated, and suddenly there was nothing between him and 2 tons of dangerous predator except 30 feet of empty space. The Shadow Fang's head snapped toward him instantly. Its lips peeled back from those crystalline teeth, and a growl rumbled from deep in its chest. The sound was so low and powerful that Jake felt it in his bones. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to get away, to get back behind the safety of the barrier. But Jake had learned a long time ago that instincts weren't always right. Running would trigger the creature's hunting response. Fighting would make it defensive. The only option was to do something it didn't expect. He walked slowly to the far corner of the containment area, away from the Shadow Fang. He kept his movements smooth and predictable. He set down the water container first, then the food, spacing them out in a line. Then he sat down with his back partially turned to the creature. It went against every survival instinct to turn away from a predator, but he needed to show he wasn't a threat. Jake wrapped his mother's blanket around his shoulders. It didn't just smell like home, it felt like a hug, like safety, like everything he was fighting to keep. He lifted the mouth harp to his lips and started playing again. Same gentle melody. Same slow, peaceful rhythm. The Shadow Fang watched him, every muscle coiled and ready to strike. Jake could see it in his peripheral vision, the way its claws were digging into the floor, the way its body was tense like a spring ready to release. But he didn't look directly at it. Direct eye contact meant challenge in the animal world. He just kept playing his music. Up in the observation deck, Ambassador David Miller from Earth's Diplomatic Corps was watching with his mouth hanging open. He turned to the Taurak advisor next to him. "What is he doing?" he whispered. "I believe," the advisor said slowly, "he is showing submission without showing weakness. It's actually quite clever." Katie was crying now, unable to look away. Other humans in the observation deck were holding their breath. Some of the alien spectators had returned, drawn by the news that the human had actually entered the cage. The Shadow Fang took a step forward. Then another. Its movements were cautious, testing. Jake could hear its claws clicking on the metal floor. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might explode, but he kept his breathing slow and steady. The creature could probably smell fear, most predators could, but it could also see that he wasn't acting afraid. He wasn't running or fighting or freezing. He was just existing peacefully in the same space. The creature moved closer, and Jake noticed something. Its left front leg, the one he thought looked stiff, was barely touching the ground. It was injured, and from the looks of the old scars around it, it had been injured for a long time. Chains had cut into the flesh, leaving deep marks that had healed badly. Jake kept playing, but he also started humming along with the melody. His grandfather had taught him that sound wasn't just about the notes, it was about the feeling behind them. So Jake hummed with all the gentleness he could manage, thinking about quiet mornings on the farm, about his little brother Tommy's laugh, about his mother's cooking, about everything good and peaceful in his life. The Shadow Fang stopped moving. It was now about 15 feet away, close enough that Jake could hear its breathing, fast and shallow, like it was scared too. The creature's nostrils flared, taking in his scent. It tilted its massive head, those 6 red eyes studying him with what almost looked like confusion. Because nothing in this creature's experience had prepared it for a human who didn't want to hurt it. Hours had passed, and the sun was starting to sink lower outside the facility. Jake could see the light changing through the small windows near the ceiling. He had maybe 2 hours left before sunset, before his time ran out. But something had shifted in the last hour. The Shadow Fang had moved closer, close enough now that Jake could smell it, a strange mix of metal and earth and something almost like cinnamon. The creature had finally eaten the food he'd laid out. It had taken nearly an hour of cautious sniffing and careful approaches, but eventually hunger had won over fear. Jake had watched from the corner of his eye as the massive predator had delicately picked up each piece of jerky, as if expecting it to be poisoned or trapped. When nothing bad happened, when Jake didn't move or attack during this vulnerable moment, something changed in the creature's body language. Now it was lying down about 10 feet away from him, still watching, still wary, but no longer looking like it wanted to kill him. Its breathing had slowed down to something more normal. Those 6 red eyes were still fixed on Jake, but they didn't look quite so afraid anymore. That's when Jake noticed the leg more clearly. The left front leg was held at an odd angle, and wrapped around it were old metal restraints, the kind used to chain dangerous animals. But these restraints had been there so long that the creature had grown around them. The metal had cut deep into the flesh, and dried blood crusted around the edges. The wound was infected, Jake could tell from the discoloration and swelling. It must have hurt with every single step the creature took. No wonder it was so aggressive. Jake would be aggressive too if he'd been living in constant pain for months or years with nobody trying to help. He moved his hand very slowly toward his backpack, telegraphing every motion so the Shadow Fang could see exactly what he was doing. The creature's eyes tracked his movement, and its muscles tensed, but it didn't attack. Jake pulled out his water bottle and a clean cloth he'd packed. His hands were shaking a little, but he tried to keep them steady. "Hey there," Jake murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I see that leg. That looks like it hurts real bad, doesn't it?" He kept his tone soft and gentle, the same way he used to talk to injured animals on the farm. "I'm going to help you, okay? Real slow. Not gonna hurt you. Just want to make it better." The Shadow Fang's head tilted again, listening. Jake wondered if it could understand his words through the translator collar around its neck, or if it was just responding to his tone. Probably the tone. Animals didn't need to understand words to understand kindness. Jake scooted forward maybe 2 feet. Then he stopped and waited, giving the creature time to accept this new distance. The Shadow Fang's tail twitched but it didn't move away. Another good sign. Jake moved forward another foot. Then another. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, but he kept his breathing calm and his movements smooth. Finally, he was close enough to reach the injured leg. This was the most dangerous moment. The creature could strike now, could kill him in seconds if it wanted to. Jake poured a little water onto the cloth, the sound seeming impossibly loud in the quiet arena. "Okay, I'm going to touch you now," Jake said softly. "It might hurt a little at first, but I promise I'm trying to help." He reached out very slowly and gently touched the cloth to the wound. The shadow fang flinched, and Jake froze, waiting. But the creature didn't pull away or attack. So Jake continued, carefully cleaning away the dried blood and infection. The creature made a low rumbling sound, and Jake tensed, ready to pull back. But it wasn't a growl. Up in the observation deck, Dr. Rachel Foster, the head xenobiologist, was staring at her datapad like it had betrayed her. She tapped it several times, ran a diagnostic, then looked again. "That can't be right," she muttered. Commander Reynolds looked over. "What is it?" "The audio sensors, they're picking up a sound from the shadow fang." Dr. Foster looked up at the actual creature through the glass, then back at her readings. "It's purring?" "That's impossible," Reynolds said flatly. "Shadow fangs don't purr. They're apex predators. They growl, roar, and kill. Those are their three modes. I'm telling you what the sensors say." Dr. Foster was pulling up historical data now, scrolling through years of research. "We've studied these creatures for decades. We've never recorded anything like this sound. But the frequency, the vibration pattern, it's consistent with purring behavior in other species." Down in the arena, Jake heard the sound too. He felt it more than heard it, a deep, rhythmic thrumming that vibrated through the floor. The shadow fang had closed two of its 6 eyes, and its massive body had relaxed in a way Jake hadn't seen before. It was still watching him with the other 4 eyes, but there was something different in that gaze now. Something softer. "Maybe nobody ever gave her a reason to," Jake said quietly, not really talking to anyone in particular. He was focused on the wound, carefully working the old restraints loose. They were crusted with dried blood and had bits of flesh stuck to them. His stomach turned, but he kept working. The metal finally came free, and the shadow fang let out a soft huffing sound, relief, maybe, or gratitude. Jake cleaned the wound properly now, wishing he had proper medical supplies. But at least the source of infection was gone. The creature would heal now, given time. The sun was touching the horizon when the announcement came through the speakers. "Trial time has concluded. The human has succeeded." The observation deck exploded with noise. Aliens were shouting, arguing, demanding to know how this was possible. Some were celebrating their winning bets, while others were throwing down their betting tablets in frustration. But the loudest sound was Katie's scream of joy and relief. She was jumping up and down, tears streaming down her face, hugging complete strangers. Jake was sitting on the floor of the arena, his back against the shadow fang's side. The creature's massive head was resting near his lap, and that deep purring sound was still rumbling through the floor. Jake was exhausted. Every muscle in his body ached from sitting still for so long, from being tensed and ready for hours. His hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. But he'd done it. He'd actually done it. Emperor Vorian stood up from his observation seat. His 4 arms were rigid at his sides, and his face was impossible to read. He moved toward the arena entrance, his advisors scrambling to follow him. The crowd parted as the massive emperor made his way down the stairs and across the main floor. He stood at the edge of the arena, staring at Jake and the shadow fang. "How?" Vorian's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more intense than when he'd been shouting. 42 of my finest warriors failed. Men and women who trained their entire lives for combat. Who studied these creatures for years. Who had the best weapons and armor money could buy. He gestured at Jake with one of his 4 hands. "You're a farmer's son with a mouth harp and a blanket. How?" Jake stood up slowly, careful not to startle the shadow fang. The creature stood as well, moving to stay close to Jake's side. It was protective now, watching the emperor with wary eyes. Jake took a breath, trying to find the right words. "Your warriors tried to dominate her," Jake said. His voice was hoarse from hours of not drinking enough water. "They went in thinking she was an enemy to defeat, a monster to conquer. They brought weapons and armor because they expected a fight." He put his hand gently on the shadow fang's side, feeling the rumble of that purr under his palm. "But you can't force trust, Your Majesty. That's not how it works. She wasn't a monster. She was a scared, hurt person who needed someone to listen." "A person?" Vorian's 3 eyes narrowed. "It's an animal. A predator." "So are humans, technically," Jake said. "We're predators too. But we're also people who feel pain and fear and loneliness. Why can't she be both?" Dr. Rachel Foster came running down from the observation deck, her tablet in hand and 3 other xenobiologists trailing behind her. She was out of breath by the time she reached the Emperor. Your Majesty, you need to see this. Our scans have revealed something extraordinary about Shadow Fangs. Something we completely missed. Vorian looked annoyed at the interruption. What are you talking about? Dr. Foster pulled up data on her tablet, projecting it into the air where everyone could see. Brain scans, chemical analysis, behavioral patterns, all kinds of scientific information that made Jake's head spin. But the doctor was practically vibrating with excitement. We've been studying Shadow Fangs wrong this entire time, she said quickly. We classified them as apex predators, solitary hunters who only know violence. But look at these brain scans. This is the social bonding center of the brain. She highlighted a section that was glowing bright on the scan. It's enormous. Bigger than we've seen in almost any other species. And these chemical markers, she pulled up another chart, these indicate pack bonding behavior. What does that mean? Vorian asked impatiently. It means Shadow Fangs aren't solitary predators at all. They're pack bonding shepherds. They form deep, lifelong connections with their chosen companions. They're protective, loyal, and social. Dr. Foster looked at the Shadow Fangs standing next to Jake. We treated them like monsters because they acted like monsters in captivity. But they were just responding to trauma and isolation. Another xenobiologist stepped forward, a young man who looked nervous about speaking in front of the Emperor. Your Majesty, there's more. We ran a full biological scan on this particular Shadow Fang. She's a mother. She was nursing when your hunters captured her 3 years ago. She was searching for offspring when she was taken. The arena went silent. Even the background noise from the observation deck stopped. Everyone was processing this information. Jake felt his throat tighten. A mother. This whole time, she'd been a mother separated from her children, trapped in a cage, in constant pain, surrounded by people trying to hurt her. No wonder she'd been so aggressive. Jake looked up at the Emperor. I want New Haven. That was the deal, and I completed the trial. But I also want something else. Vorian's expression was unreadable. You're in no position to make additional demands, boy. With respect, Your Majesty, I think I am. Jake's voice was stronger now. I want her freed. Not traded or sold or moved to a bigger cage. Actually freed. And I want resources allocated to find her offspring. They've been alone for 3 years. If they're even still alive, they need their mother. That's 2 demands, Vorian said. 3, actually, Jake continued. I want all the Shadow Fangs in captivity to be re-evaluated. If they're really social bonding creatures like Dr. Foster says, then keeping them isolated is torture. They should either be freed or matched with compatible companions. The Emperor stared at Jake for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. Not the cruel, mocking laugh from before. This was different, genuine, almost respectful. Your species continues to surprise me, Jake Thompson, Vorian said. He looked at the Shadow Fang, then back at Jake. Very well. All 3 demands are accepted. New Haven remains with your family. This Shadow Fang is yours to care for. And I will personally fund the search for her offspring.